Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Comics Resources for Libraries. I am Shira Pilarski, president of the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable Board. I think we can go to thank you. Perfect. Before we begin, I'd like to go over some technical details. A link to today's slide presentation was included in the reminder email that you received from Zoom 1 hour ago. To download it, please open that email, scroll to the bottom, and click on the link located there. If you have any trouble accessing them, please contact webinars@booklistonline.com. The audience is in listen-only mode, but we welcome any questions that you may have. On the bottom of your screen is a toolbar with a button for Q&A. If you have a question or need technical assistance, simply click Q&A and type your message into the box that appears. We will do our best to respond to all tech-related questions, and we'll pass along all other questions to today's panelists so that they can follow up with you after the webinar. Booklist offers closed captioning on all webinars. To enable or disable captions on your screen, please look for and click the captions icon on the toolbar mentioned earlier. From there, you can select show or hide captions from the menu that appears. If you choose to enable subtitles, you can adjust the size of the captions at any time by clicking caption settings. And finally, Booklist expects all participants to maintain an atmosphere of respect and fairness. Anyone who violates this standard of behavior, including engaging in any form of harassment, may, at the discretion of the organizers, be immediately removed. Now, I have a slightly wonky setup right now, so you're going to see my hand go over this a lot. Sorry about that. I just moved. But we are going to start our presentation with the co-chairs of the GNCRT Metadata and Cataloging Committee, Kino Katabe and Stephanie Mannheim. And I'm going to turn my camera and mute myself, and you all can start.
Hi, sorry. So am I sharing my own slides right now for my own machine? Oh, okay. Um, okay, I get it. There you go. So yeah, I am Kino Katabe. I'm head of special materials cataloging section at the University of Colorado Boulder Libraries, and I'm joined with my co-chair for the Metadata and Cataloging Committee, Stephanie Mannheim. And we're just going to do a quick overview of a couple of the comics resources that our committee has produced in recent years. Most prominently, the GNCRT produced the best practices for cataloging comics and graphic novels using RDA and Mark 21 in 2022. And that was primarily written by past GNCRT metadata and cataloging committee members. Those members are Allison Bayland, Stephen Holloway, Kayla Cooney, and Deborah Tamaris. So I just want to give them a quick shout out to those past committee members. They put a lot of work into that document. And I know that not everyone attending this call are necessarily catalogers. So Stephanie and I will try to take everyone into our world for a bit and just keep everything interesting and digestible for all. So even if you aren't into cataloging or technical services, we always think it's worth having foundational knowledge to this side of librarianship because it really is an important part of the library ecosystem, and it determines how patrons not only interact with the library, but also access these resources. So yeah, it is arguably more difficult to catalog comics than traditional literature. I think a large part in what makes comics cataloging so complex is really just how eclectic and varied the medium is. Yeah, when we say comics, that can mean normal, like syndicated comic strips like Garfield to manga, and we have manhwa and webtoons and uh, webtoons that are meant to be scrolled on your smartphone, like up and down, comic titles and series that several authors have contributed to over long periods of time. Um, it could be many, many things. So it all lends itself to many cataloging inconsistencies. So basically, what those past members were trying to do when they created that best practices guide was to collectively discuss their own practices at first, and they created this 80-page document. On top of that, they also produced a 50-page appendices to supplement that. And it's completely free to use. You can click on that link there. You can Google it. Many of you may have already be using it already. It's a wonderful just document. They also produced last year in 2023 an accompanying scholarly journal article on kind of the process they went through and some more of the more deeper historical context behind that. That was produced in Art Library's journal as well. I can try to find that link and put it in the chat as well, because I don't think it's on the slide. And then we can go to the next slide, and I'll hand it over to Stephanie, who will deep dive into one of the topics.
Hey, I'm Stephanie, either is fine. I am the other co-chair of the Metadata and Cataloging Committee. So I'm going to go through some of the topics that are in our best practices guide. I'm not going to go super in depth. As you know, as Kino just said, it's an 80-page document. So we only have so much time. But there's a couple kind of general categories in the guide. To start with, we talk about some of the pre-cataloging decisions, particularly around how to treat continuing comic titles. These are things that are usually referred to as series. In this guide, they're referred to as continuing titles because the term series can get a little confusing because it's used in a couple different ways. But there are a few options that we might recommend you use. There isn't necessarily one correct option, but we go through some of the pros and cons, including cataloging titles individually, which can create a lot of records, but can make it easy to browse. There's also cataloging with multi-volume bibliographic records, and another option using serial records. And then both of these, this depends on, it can get complicated with things like title variations. The titles of comic series can change. There can be creators who leave, creators who come in and join the project, things like that. So it can get a little complicated, as Kino already mentioned, but we talk about, kind of walk people through some of the ways that we can start thinking about things before you even start cataloging. Next, we move into descriptive cataloging. A lot of this information is taken from a comics indicia page. That's basically the preferred source, but a lot of times you need to look in other places. Sometimes creators aren't, if it's a very old comic, a creator might not be properly credited and you'll need to go to another source. This example that I have here is a webcomic, Check Please, which is a published volume, but it has the dates here from when the webcomic was published online, 2017 to 2020. And then there are all sorts of other sources that can be used for this descriptive cataloging. Next slide. All right, next we go into the notes field. This can be really useful for some of the very wonky comic-specific things like Marvel went through a period of time. Maybe they're still doing this. Been a while since I worked a lot with Marvel comics, but they were doing both legacy numbering. So this was legacy number 45, and it was also issue number 5. Can be a little confusing. So we have in the notes field that it has the legacy numbering on the cover, starting with issue number 5, legacy number 45. So both of these are listed on the cover. So we have that in the notes. And there are lots of other examples like this, visual, otherwise, that you can find in the guide. For subject and genre terms, This is really helpful for using characters, settings, and other topics to help patrons find the comics that they're looking for. And then for access points, there are a lot of comics have, as many of you know, a lot of comics have teams of creators, both writers and artists, and lots of other people too. So these are all things that are taken into account when thinking about access points. Basically, a lot of times comics use a whole team, so to think about that. So those are some of the kind of main topics here. We also have some appendices, so I will then say move on to the next slide and hand it back to Kino, who will go through our appendices.
Thank you, Steph. And yeah, so as we mentioned, it's 50 pages of appendices, and I'm not going to go through all of them within the best practices guide. But among all of them, I really recommend if you are looking to begin your comics cataloging journey, or just want to maybe double check on your current localized system, check out Appendix D, which is an index that shows which fields are important across all approaches according to PCC standards. And yeah, and also it's important to cataloging specific kinds of comics as well as the fields that are optional and or just not recommended for those particular comics. And perhaps if you're not a cataloger and if you just want more foundational knowledge on comics terminology, maybe check out Appendix F. Some of your patrons might be using those terms. It's a glossary of comics related terms that could be interesting for you. So Appendix F might help you in interacting with your patrons. Next slide, Taylor. So the project that we were primarily working on last year was this comics classification survey. One thing that the best practices guide does not provide guidance on is the classification of comics and graphic works. And this was intentional because it's just such a large undertaking. Libraries have such a wide variance of classification systems. It could be in an academic library, the LCC, or even the Dewey system, or it could even be a homegrown system of some combination of those, or just some localized version of that. And as well as coloring, it tends to be hyper localized as well. It was just such a large thing to prescribe that it just wasn't worth it for those previous members. They've already done so much in those past few years in making that 150-page document. To do a whole classification prescription would have been far too much, and it needed some more background. So what we wanted to do was to gather some more data and information across how all libraries across the United States were currently doing their localized versions of library classification. So we wanted to gather as much data as possible on as many libraries as possible. And yeah, from the slide, you can see we were able to gather 284 unique responses who responded to our survey. And we are still working on analyzing it. And hopefully later next year, we will be able to publish our findings within a peer-reviewed journal article. So really excited for that. Keep an eye out. Yeah, that's all me and Steph have for us. So we're gonna hand it back to the rest of the presenters. Thank you.
Thank you, Kino and Stephanie. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about the sort of origin of the collaborative committee that we're going to hear about a little bit later, which was a collaboration between the Black Caucus of ALA and GNCRT. And that is going to be myself and Tamala Chambers, who's a fellow committee member. And I think Tamala is going to start on the first slide. So I am going to mute whenever Tamala is able to get. There you are. Yay.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. As Shira said, my name is Tamala Chambers. I am she, her pronouns, and I am a district chief Southwest for the Chicago Public Library. I joined this very, very important work at the beginning, a little bit after the statement was released condemning increased violence and racism toward Black Americans and people of color by the Black Caucus of the American Library Association. And the partnership came about after the George Floyd murder and the civil unrest that ensued, because there was a need to uplift Black voices, Black experiences, and Black futures, hence Black Lives Matter. So shortly after, GNCRT joined together or affirmed our statement by standing with us, and this beautiful partnership was born. And the first iteration of it was a master list of comics created by Black creators and art illustrated by Black artists. And then we later began to have like breakout smaller lists based on themes. You want to go to the next slide? Or is it, you have anything to add, Shira? Okay. All right. So to get your books on the list, there's certain criteria that we needed to have. So first, and probably of utmost importance, it had to be created by a Black storyteller, right? Has to display empathy and respect for Black bodies, no stereotypes, no over-exaggerated features, that sort of thing. So that is one way to disrespect, a Black body. Introduces readers to Black art, people, history, organizations, and communities. Represents Black experiences both domestically and throughout the world. So, the totality of the Black experience across the diaspora. Showcases a diversity of artistic mediums, includes lived experiences of Black people from all demographics. Reinforces Black stories of success, resistance, endurance, and love. Super important during a very tumultuous time. So there's a way for you to find yourself, escape, and just know that you do matter and that you have all of these wonderful gifts and things to share. It also employs a wide array of genres, demonstrates an understanding of cultural nuance, represents independent and non-traditional publishing, which is also important because a lot of Black creators are often published with small companies or sometimes even self-published. Includes stories of ancient Black civilizations as well as Black people's continued existence in the future, right? So there's life before, enslavement. There are lots of early civilizations that speak to like the innovation and ingenuity of Black people. It improves access to authentic Black stories for all patrons and exposes, not exploding, we don't want to explode anything, exposes Black creators to wider audiences. And that is the criteria. And I'm going to turn it over to Shira.
Thank you. And yeah, that thing at the bottom, not all elements listed above are required for inclusion. And I do want to mention that when I joined this project, it was after the initial list was published in June of 2020. And that list was kind of thrown together very quickly. And it was important to have it available as quickly as possible, but we got a little bit more careful about the criteria for inclusion in subsequent versions of the list, and that transitions pretty perfectly into the next slide. So this right here is a photo of the 2020 printable PDF version of the list. This is one that we were a little bit more careful in consideration of things. We got art by the incredible Crystal Chen. If you don't know who Crystal Chen is, look up We Here, which is an organization that works with BIPOC librarians and library workers. And Crystal specifically incorporated the King Protea flower in the logo, which is the official flower of South Africa, and is basically, it can withstand fires. It's sort of this like beautiful, colorful, and like really resilient flower. So we were like, that's so amazing. It's so perfect for this list and for this time period. You can find this and print out copies of it to distribute in your libraries. It is on both the Black Caucus of ALA website and the GNCRT website. You will be getting a lot of links tomorrow. So if you don't see them right now, don't worry about that. And we can move on to the next slide. So to tie with the publication of that version of the list, we had one really incredible program with John Jennings and Stacey Robinson, who are comics creators and professors. They run a kind of a organization, like collaborative project called Black Kirby, inspired kind of by Jack Kirby and how, you know, when Jack Kirby was creating comics, being Jewish was like kind of not being white, essentially. And so Jack Kirby's comics sort of spoke to more the contemporary Black experience in that way. John Jennings and Stacey Robinson have worked on a lot of incredible comics, many of which are on the collaborative lists that we're going to talk about a little bit more. And this is still available to view online on the ALA YouTube page and on the GNCRT website. I think it's also on the BCALA website as well. So you can track that down and watch it and just feel uplifted. And then we can move to the next slide. And because that was so great, we were like, you know, it's COVID, we want to do a lot more stuff. So we decided to present about the list that we had made and about the programming. So this is myself. You might not recognize me because I have longish red hair in the bottom right, and Tamala in the top right, who also has longer hair. And then Sandra Farag and Demosa Weber-Bay and Tiki Love, who were all fellow committee members. So we presented about it at the Midwinter virtual conference in 2021. That's also available to watch online. We can go to the next slide. This was Black Future Month. We were kind of talking about how Black History Month is great and it's so important, but also we envision Black people in the future, not just in the past. And so we were able to have this really wonderful presentation with Jerry Craft, who wrote New Kid, first comic to win the Newbery Award. Most of the people here are probably librarians or library staff, so you probably are familiar with that book. And then in the bottom right corner, we have Ariel Johnson, who ran Amalgam, which is a comic shop in Philadelphia. And I actually recently found out that Ariel was the first Black comic book shop owner on the East Coast. And I just think that it's extra cool that she's a woman. And then we can move on to the next slide. And oh, sorry, really quickly before we get into the thematic list, we did also have other wonderful programs, but we, for various reasons, we weren't able to put them online. But just a shout out to our really cool Afrofuturism program with Tim Fielder, look him up. And Tamala moderated a really wonderful program about kind of girl power in Ironheart with Eve L. Ewing. So shout out to those two.
All right. So, can you go back to the previous slide? Thank you. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the thematic list. So we're broken down by category: superheroes, Afrofuturism, fantasy and horror, Good Trouble, and Greenwood Avenue. And I got to tell you, my absolute favorite one was the superhero ones, because I am just a super fan. I need to mention that, Miles Morales is not included here because at the time his story wasn't written by or drawn by a Black creator. So we made a note in our list to push or to advocate publishers to include more Black creatives in it. So I love superhero stories because there's a really good parallel between fantasy and the reality of the experiences of Black folks. So it was just a wonderful list of superheroes who are fighting back against the establishment. They are for the good. So it's just a great list. The other one, kind of like this one too, is Afrofuturism. And of course, as Shira said, we want to imagine a world like Black history is great, but there's also room for Black people in the future. And this list focuses on science fiction, technology, and art through a Black lens, and it celebrates the innovations of Black people. And then there's fantasy and horror, so pure escapism, or you can contextualize or do some sense making of some of the current or real things that are happening. So this is a place for that. And then Good Trouble, of course, inspired by Congressman John Lewis. And it's about books, so features all graphic novels about people who were rabble rousers, so to speak, and challenged the establishment and got into all sorts of good trouble, right? So there's a such thing as good trouble. And Greenwood Avenue was created. It's a smallish list, but it was created to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre. And it was really important because there was not a lot of information known about this, chapter in our history. And it includes stories about the neighborhood, the community, so to speak, that was, virtually wiped away from history, and it was wiped away from Oklahoma. So I'll turn it over to Shira.
Thank you. So we can go to the next slide, which is in 2022, we decided to make a new updated list because there were a number of really great new books that had come out. We realized that, how I mentioned that in the June 2020 list was kind of thrown together and it was great and it was important, but there were things that we sort of were like, we want to make sure that we're actually, every book on here is by a Black creator, Black author, Black illustrator. We looked at the 2020 list and realized that we could do even more work in curating some of those titles and bringing in some new titles as well. So to go along with this list, rather than, hiring a person that we knew to be a great graphic designer, we had, this was an idea from Shantae Burns-Simpson, who was at that time, BCALA president and is actually now the GNCRT president-elect, to have a teen art contest. So we had teen groups affiliated with groups in their school submit different designs just for the cover. So this cover on the left is a design that was submitted by the DeKalb School of the Arts. And this is also a printable PDF. You can go on the GNCRT or BCALA website. And this one just has a little bit more updated information. And that might be our last slide for this project, I think, but let's move on to the next. Yes, perfect. So that transitions flawlessly into the next thing that we're going to hear about, which is basically we decided that this BCALA collaboration was so important and so great, and that it would be a great idea to have GNCRT collaborate with other affiliate organizations, including the NALCOs, the National Associations of Librarians of Color. So we were able to collaborate with REFORMA, on a Latino comics list, and we'll hear a little bit about that from the co-chairs of that committee, Cristina Vortia and Maria Vega. And I am going to mute myself and turn my video off.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maria Vega, and I am the assistant manager of the Hollywood Library, which is a library in Broward County, Florida. I am the Florida president of REFORMA, and I am the REFORMA co-chair for the GNCRT and REFORMA, but I represent the REFORMA side, even though I am a member of the GNCRT as well.
Hi, and I am Cristina Vortia. I am the Maria's co-chair. I represent the Graphic Novels and Comics Roundtable, but I am also a REFORMA member. And even though I need to renew, I got a letter today that I need to put in my renewal. And I am the chief librarian of the Moreland Spingarn Research Center at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And it really has been a pleasure to serve alongside Maria on this list. I'm really excited for it to come out. Okay.
Go ahead.
So we really had a fun year this year. And Maria and we really sat down together and we called each other and we were just like, okay, how do we want to do this? What kind of representation do we want? What do we want to see? Like, how do we want to create this list? How do we want to organize it? And it really kind of happened organically. We also had the pleasure of having as an advisor, Dr. Aldama, who was amazing in coming to our meetings and kind of giving us his ideas and recommendations. Yeah, we really wanted to emphasize looking at representation across the Latinx experience, but we also talked about identity. I'll let Maria talk a little bit more about that and how some of those conversations kind of happened, but we really did sit down together and talk about what we wanted this list to represent.
I'm sorry, my computer is glitching. I just dropped out of the presentation.
I thought I saw it kind of like pause a little bit. Oh, sorry, Maria.
No, it's okay. So I just missed what you said, but I know what you said was it was an amazing, fun.
Well, I said that we you and I really collaborated and we wanted to talk about like identity and representation across the Latinx experience, and that we had the pleasure and honor of having Dr. Aldama as an advisor to kind of really guide some of like how we talk about popular culture and representation and what that means as we have these very rich discussions. But very early on, like our first conversation, you and I just kind of met together. Hey girl, how are we going to organize this? And I thought that you would be really great to talk about how those conversations like happened and how that kind of shaped the how we organized the list this year.
So I think one of the first things we did is when you try to talk about Latinos as a group, you're in a lot of trouble because there are so many different people that fit into this category. We talked about how Latinos are geographically spread everywhere. And then there's the idea of, well, how do you want to define it? Do we all want to define us as speaking Spanish? Which isn't the case because we have many indigenous communities. We have places like Brazil where they speak Portuguese. Do we want to define it as a geographic area where we only consider North and South America, but then we are going to lose places like Angola and Spain and Portugal? Do we include places like the Philippines? So there were so many questions on how we were even going to define Latino. And even if we wanted to use the word Latino or Latinx or Hispanic, because as a community, we don't even have one word to define ourselves. So we had to deal with a lot of these questions. We decided immediately that we wanted to represent the wide diversity of geographic locations and languages. So, we were looking for books that were outstanding, that would represent North America, South America, Spain, indigenous communities. We also wanted to represent the wide diversity of what Latinos look like and sound like. It's very important to know that we don't all look the same and we don't all sound the same. One of our committee members, we always laugh because my name is Maria Vega. I'm from Florida. I'm light skinned, but I'm from Mexico. And then we have Dan Johnson, who is also Latino, lives in Oregon, and I believe he's from El Salvador. So there's no one person is what a Latino looks like or sounds like, or even if we call ourselves Latinos. We also address, like BCALA, the previous committee talked about, do they want to include titles that are written by non-Latino authors, but that just portray something so outstanding that we want to include it. So we actually did include some of the more recent Miles Morales books, because they do an outstanding job of portraying what Latino life is like. The only thing we ended up narrowing our focus to is that we decided we wanted books that were published in the United States. And that was only to narrow our focus because we had a lot of outstanding, phenomenal books. And Christina could tell you, the nominations just kept coming and coming and coming. So that was our only limiter. And the other thing we had to do, which a lot of it broke a lot of our hearts, is we had to make sure that libraries could still purchase these books. So we had to exclude a few phenomenal titles because there's no way that libraries can get these titles. The nice thing is we will be able to include some supplementary lists that will include these phenomenal books, but they're no longer in publication. So you're going to have to pay a lot of money for them unless you already have them. That's going to be if you have these titles, please don't read them list. Christina, do you have anything else? Do you have any other conversations that we had on how we were going to just define a lot of the concepts we were looking for?
Yeah, we absolutely did have those discussions, and they were very important. We also had an opportunity, and I think Maria was on the panel that happened earlier this year with one of our members and Dr. Aldama.
The next slide, please.
There it is. Great segue, Maria. Yeah.
So we were very fortunate that REFORMA, the international round table there, decided to do a webinar where they wanted to talk about the portrayal of Latinos in comic books. And it timed perfectly with the creation of our list. So we were able to have Dr. Aldama, who is our mentor, one of our mentors with this list. And it was actually moderated by Dan Johnson, who was also a committee member. And then we had some outstanding authors on this list and illustrators. So Ashley Robin Franklin writes The Hills of Estrella Roja. Edgar Miranda Rodriguez, he writes Boricua, and a phenomenal partnership with DC, where they had several superheroes, literally in fiction meets reality. Superheroes were partnering with his heroine to help Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. An illustrator, a trans illustrator, and Jesus Cosio is from Peru. So IRC picked a couple of the artists, we picked a couple of the artists, and we talked about really important issues, which were some of the issues we actually looked in our committee, such as, do these books have stereotypes? Are they harmful stereotypes? And not just stereotypes about Latinos. Like, we were very cognizant that we wanted to pick books that were going to portray the LGBTQ community in a positive light. Were the authors and the illustrators of mixed or Latino heritage, or were they just somebody that was writing about it, but not in a well-researched way? We compared like the old Miles Morales with the newer versions of Miles Morales, and we talked about how happy we are that a lot of these authors and illustrators are really paying attention now, and they're getting consultants and experts from our communities to come and really give input. But the best is when we can have our own authentic voices in these books as authors and illustrators. And one of the last things we did was talk about publishing and how the publishing community, we would just love to see these more diverse voices, and not necessarily all superheroes. We want to see more of these amazing books that reflect our community in every way, shape, and form, from California to Florida to Texas to North Carolina to Alaska, because Latinos are everywhere in the United States and in all of these varied geographical regions. One of the other things we noticed was, I mean, when we talk about indigenous populations of Latinos, which there are many, 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 they're almost absent from the majority of our comic books and panels. So that was another thing we talked about, was how we really need to focus on adding indigenous voices to these lists and to these works. So that was one of the nice things about when we worked with Christina. We were making sure we were aware and trying to make sure we really did our best to find as many representations of the beautiful and diverse Latino community that is there. Because we're not, just like African Americans and the Black community, we're not one people. We're many, 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 that a lot of people just like to lump us all together.
Agreed. And we had some very rich discussions about representation, about stereotypes as well. And our list is nearing completion. So these are conversations that are still being had, and these are conversations as we really start to break down and think about how we're going to organize some of our sub lists, and working together of what that is going to look like and how that's going to form and how that's going to come together has been a really beautiful part of the process. And there's so many, we have a great problem that there are so many good books to have and so many good books that are still coming in that maybe it's itchy to kind of make some extensions. But I feel like at the end of the day, it's all going to ensure that our list is excellent, that our list is impactful, and our primary goal is to make sure that these excellent books get into the hands of the communities that need them, and that our libraries are well stocked with great books that have the best representation. And it has really been a pleasure working with Maria and with this committee, because everybody's voices are coming together, and how these conversations happen, that sometimes they just even go on, and we'll have like a scheduled meeting, but we're just like so engaged in the conversation that they just kind of keep on going. And that's really been a beautiful part of this collaboration.
I did want to say, just like the previous version of the list with BCALA and GNRC, we did have a list of very specific characteristics we were looking at, which was itemized on the previous page. And we have a list of roughly 84 books that made the final cut between adults, teens, and children. So we are looking towards that. I know GNCRT is actually working on getting the artwork done for our list. We were inspired by the previous iteration of our list was a hand holding a pen and paper. So we really like that. And we were trying to find something to show that our list has grown out of the previous collaboration. And then you guys changed your art, which was awesome to have the kids do it. I love that idea, but hopefully we're going to get a Belpré winning artist to do the art for this. We're working on those final touches right now. So we look forward to being able to announce this list shortly. And we're thrilled, at least on the REFORMA side, we're thrilled with the partnership and just so glad about this collaboration. And we can't wait to get this list into everyone's hands.
Absolutely. It has really been, it's really been a joy to watch it kind of, to form and to grow. And Maria, you said it perfectly.
And I think I speak for Christina and myself, where we both say we hope these collaborations that GNCR do just continue, and these lists continue to grow, and that they encourage artists and illustrators and publishers to publish more works to keep creating these outstanding materials. I think that's good with us, Shira. We'll pass it back to you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. I want to very quickly mention, thank you, Maria, for bringing up the Miles Morales thing again, because 2020 doesn't seem like that long ago, but it was so long ago that at that point, Brian Michael Bendis, I think, was the only person who had made Miles Morales stories. But by this point, we have the beautiful Justin A. Reynolds and Pablo Leon middle grade graphic novels about Miles Morales. So we have Black and Latino representation in the creative team there. So those books are awesome, and I'm super excited that they exist. And since you mentioned the continuing collaboration, this was not a press release, hasn't gone out yet, but this was announced at my president's program at the ALA annual conference. Our next collaboration is going to be with the Rainbow Roundtable, focusing on LGBTQ plus, et cetera, comics. And I'm super excited about that. And we will put out a call for volunteers for that this fall. So stay tuned. I also feel like I would be remiss to not mention that the GNCRT has, inspired by this REFORMA collaboration, created some very cool, we had some cool reading comics is reading t-shirts made, but my favorite are the bilingual ones. So we have our Leer Comics es Leer, reading comics is reading, which of course I felt that I had to wear today. So if you go to the ALA store, if you want one of those shirts, it's pretty cool and it's comfortable. And
I have mine on order because those are my favorite too.
Yeah. So that's a thing to keep in mind. So I think we probably have a second to, if anybody who presented today wants to share one or two comics that they read recently that they were particularly excited about. And if you don't want to, that's fine. I can start. I really loved Punk Rock Karaoke by Bianca Eunice. Which is spelled Xunise. It is a teen, but has like fun vibes about a punk band made up of like queer, Black, and BIPOC otherwise people in Chicago, and it's really cool. And Tamala, if you haven't read it, because I know you're a big Chicago person, you definitely have to.
Thank you. We'll get on that.
Anybody else have any others?
I just read Manu, which is a graphic novel about a Filipino young person. This is definitely a middle grade graphic novel. It's very much along the lines of New Kid and Mexikid. So, and it's an outstanding graphic novel, and it's a great representation of the Filipino culture. So I highly recommend it. MANU.
Yeah. I have been reading so many good things lately that my mind is kind of trying to, but I feel like the Queen, um is it Queenie or Queen of Harlem? About the Harlem Madam who's kind of like run like the show of 1920s Harlem. That's been really good. I've been really enjoying it. Um, and I highly recommend. It's kind of sharing a little bit of unknown history, but you've kind of got this woman that's kind of like take no prisoners, taking no stuff off of people. And it's hey, that's it. That's it. I highly recommend it. Thank you, Shira. Shira, you came through.
I'm a librarian. It's what I do.
I really enjoyed the Wendy Award by Walter Scott. It's the newest book in the Wendy series, published by Drowning Quarterly. There's always really funny art world parodies, drawn in like a really good zine style.
I'll say Okinawa. One of my colleagues who's actually in attendance put me onto this one. Say examines the history of Okinawa and its military occupation, and it won a bunch of awards as well. It's a classic, and yeah.
Okay. Unless somebody else had something else to say, I'm going to move on. I'm looking to see if anybody else unmutes. I think we're good. Okay, perfect. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you so much for attending. I realized that I did not update. Ooh, the T in ALA GNCRT for the Facebook is a little wonky, but there should be a T there. I did not update this after last year's book list webinar, so there's the old Twitter logo instead of the X logo, and we don't have the Blue Sky logo on here, but we are also on Blue Sky Lib Comics, so look us up. Get on our Discord. I highly recommend getting on the Discord. It's a great place. People will just, sort of vent about frustrating things that are happening at work there. Like, it's kind of just a really comparatively like safe place to just go and get solidarity and get, hey, I was thinking about purchasing this for this particular collection. Do you think it would be better suited to this or this other one, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely something to look up. And you can go to the GNCRT website right there. I think that's actually wrong also. That should redirect you, but I don't think we have the /RT/GNCRT. I think it's just ala.org/GNCRT now. And the BCALA and REFORMA websites are also, you have the power to Google these things. So I will trust that you can do that yourselves. We will be sending links out, all of the links of the things that we were talking about today. And I believe the next slide is the one that we now will go to. So tomorrow, all attendees will receive an email containing links to today's slide presentation, title list, certificate of completion, and video recording. For more about Booklist webinars, be sure to visit www.booklistonline.com/webinars, where you can view archives of past webinars and register for upcoming ones like those you see here. And now, thank you. It's Graphic Novels and Libraries Month here at Booklist, and we're celebrating with tons of free #ReadGraphic content and resources. Check out Booklist's Graphic Novels and Libraries Month supplement, currently free and open to all on Booklist's website, and featuring a wonderful section by GNCRT past president Robin Brenner, so definitely read that. And don't forget to enter our #ReadGraphic sweepstakes for a chance to win graphic novel swag from our sponsors. And then one more. Thank you again for joining us today. One more huge thank you to our panelists on the GNCRT committees. This concludes today's webinar. See you next time. If you had a question that didn't get answered, it's going to be sent to panelists, and we will definitely make sure to be in touch. Thank you.